Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. Today, we have our first of a kind drinking podcast where we are going to be reintroducing ourselves to our audience and just hanging out and enjoying a glass of cider together.
Yeah, this has been an episode in the making. I feel like it's been some half-hearted jokes here and there about having our first drinking podcast, but a couple reasons why I think it made sense today. Number one, we're celebrating the big escrow closing, your condo over on West, your condo flip. Now, we will be having that follow-up episode with a breakdown of all the numbers here in a couple weeks. So we wanted to crack this bottle of cider open, celebrate that, and yeah, like you said, just kind of do a reintroduction of ourselves, the podcast, just kind of do a behind-the-scenes look for people who may have been listening for a long time and not really been with us since all the way back in episode 1, 2 years ago. So.
Yeah, and especially sometimes we're a little bit overly professional, and I think a lot of people don't really know who we are all the time. So this is a good opportunity for us to kind of just talk, chat as if somebody were sitting with us in the office, and hopefully it'll give you guys a little bit more courage if you have questions to reach out and understand that we're not always super on our toes about being professional, and sometimes we are able to relax. Let's share what we're drinking here.
Let's do it.
We actually brought on Colin. We've talked about him a couple of times. Colin is our leads manager. He's also has a background in the craft cider industry, and he introduced us to Liberty Cider Works. And to celebrate, we're having some of their Manchurian crab apple, which Cade and I don't really drink beer, so this is a much better decision. And it's sitting at 12.5%. This is a pretty strong cider, more like almost like a wine. So that's what we're drinking.
Boom. I'm ready. So let's do a quick cheers.
Cheers, buddy.
So to recap, I think the place where I kind of wanted to start was really just kind of going all the way back to even before episode 1. I mean, we were two guys who very little experience in real estate when we kind of hit this idea of wanting to start a podcast. And looking back at it, and in all honesty, for anybody who was looking in, I would have been like, especially me, still a freshman or sophomore in college, I think at the time, and very minimal real estate experience, freshly licensed. I would have been like, what the hell does this guy have to talk about? What does he have to share with anybody? I mean, I barely closed, 1, 2, maybe 3 deals at that time. But I think the growth we've seen, not only has the podcast grown, but I think both of us as individuals, both of us in our partnership with Early Bird Investments, I think seeing that progression of growth just within all aspects has been really, really cool.
Yeah. When we started, neither of us were doing nearly what we're doing now. And that's, there's no surprise, right? So we always talk about, like, in order to be successful, it's consistency over time. And I think one of the things that we did really well when we were younger was we just jumped in. And so when we started the podcast, I think that year I sold a little over $6 million. Last year I sold $14 million. And I was only working on it half the time. So, a very different world when we started. I kind of like the fact that that happened, too, because I think it forced us to do a lot of things we wouldn't have done. We interviewed people who are a lot better than us. We spent time thinking about what we need to learn, what we need to teach. We got better at what we were doing. And then, especially with the introduction of the book episodes, I think that's been really helpful. It forces us to stay sharp on reading new books and providing new content. And I think, honestly, without the podcast, we would not be in the same position.
No, I don't think so either. And you made a comment that I had to laugh internally a little bit about, which was we've been instilled for so long to just jump in and do it, right? Not get the analysis paralysis and stuff like that. If you look back, our very first episode was with the Clayson Group backdrop over at Iron Key And then, we've been in and out of signing rooms, and we were over at Placer Title for an episode. We've used iPhone cameras. We've had no cameras. We've had crappy audio, and now we've got good audio, right? So one of the biggest lessons, I think, looking back, was you hit the nail on the head, was just we jumped in and did it, right? And to see the progression from, episode 1 or even seasons 1 and 2, when we were kind of honing in on topics for, seasons 1, 2, and 3, to now when we've got our boys, Jake and Ethan, behind the cameras, working our audio, video, editing. And I think just the level of our podcast has really grown as we have with it. And I agree. I think we would not be in the same place we are right now if not for the podcast, even though we really technically, we're never in the podcast to make money and haven't really made any money off of the podcast in terms of ad revenue or stuff like that, because it's just been never our goal to make money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably a lot of people who would say that was really dumb of us to not try to set this up to be, some kind of monetization. For us, like Liberty Cider Works didn't ever give us anything to shout them out. We're just in the business of shouting out good stuff. So it's just been interesting, and I think you and I have made a lot more from the personal growth, especially it's not always easy doing a podcast. You have to actually think through what are going to be good topics. You have to organize guests. You have to get the video guys. You have to pay a lot of stuff for a lot of stuff before you can even really get a good looking episode going. And I think you and I have understood that if you give abundantly, things come back abundantly. And so we've done our best to give free information, teach people, coach people, and we've both been rewarded with better businesses and a better group of people around us.
Absolutely. And I know way back when we started, when we were brainstorming, about what we wanted, the name of the podcast to be, I still remember, it's one of the clear memories I have back at Iron Key, later in the day, sitting there brainstorming about podcast names and really what, the podcast would truly be about. And I know we narrowed in, and really Pursuit of Property was born with the sole purpose of helping young adults, young entrepreneurs who are interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate. And looking back at all of the episodes we've done so far, I think we've really stayed true to that purpose, which I think in and of itself is a really good accomplishment for us to look at and recognize, because, although we may have deviated an episode here or there, but still talking about really good topics, I think our overall purpose, we've stayed really true to that throughout all of our seasons, all of our episodes. So when somebody, a young entrepreneur who's looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, can go back and look at all of these episodes, seasons 1, 2, 3, all of our standalone episodes, and get a really good gauge on how to do any one of those 3 things in real estate.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost 75 episodes in. And I mean, there was some stat that the top 1% of podcasts are, was it 23 or 21 episodes? Jake, do you remember? Regardless, it was a little bit over 20 episodes. So we've really crushed that number. And I think we've been picking up steam over the last year, especially. We have really good guests coming on, people who are knowledgeable in their market, people who are knowledgeable in what their topics are. And, one episode we might have something that's more for inspiration. And we have a big one coming up with EVC Homes, which would be a big inspiration to teach people about it. And then we also have Breakdown, where we show exactly hey, here's how you'd structure your follow-up. And I think both do well. And I think, like you said, we haven't really deviated much from, what we've set out to do. Yeah.
And something I'm really happy about that we've done the past year is, after, seasons 1 and 2, or even from the very beginning, I would say we've never really been truly consistent with the podcast. And I mean that in the sense of, having a structured, dedicated time each week, not only 1, to record content, but also 2, to post, publish, and distribute content, right? And, we've had our highs and lows throughout, seasons 1, 2, 3, then our standalone episodes of trying to reach that consistency, right? But I think within this past year, especially with the addition of, having Jake and Ethan behind the camera, we're also accountable to them, right? So I think we've been really, really good at being consistent over the past year or so. And I think now we've got a good little buffer. So even if for whatever reason we can't record, one of us is on vacation or, one of us is sick, we're still publishing content. Content is still going out. So from the listeners' point of view, there's no hiccups. They're still getting an episode every Thursday, 11 a.m.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's also jump into what we're doing personally. It sounds like the last 3 years, you've graduated college, you've done a lot of stuff. What are you up to nowadays?
Yeah.
Just to share.
Yeah. Graduated college last May. So I've been fully out of school for a little over a year. And I know I've talked to a few people in this space who are also going to school or have recently graduated school. First one I can think of, I'll shout out my boy, Dylan Miracle. Just talked with him the other week. He just graduated school, right? I think school was a very big burden. It was, and our mentors, Benny and Jason, they always, made it a priority to tell me that school should be the number one priority, right? Just getting through school. You're close. Just go through and finish, right? So been out of school about a year, been now hitting this full time in real estate. There was a period of time for 3 or 4 months where, dude, income was non-existent, right? And I think, it was one of this business is notorious for the peaks and valleys, and it's always our goal to minimize those. But, fresh out of school and now dedicating, full time into the real estate space, I experienced a very big lull. And, it forced me to go out there and get a part-time job in the restaurant industry for 3, 4, maybe 5 months. Mm-hmm. And I know you've got a really great story of having to do the same exact thing in the past as well. I think that was really good. Let me get my footing a little bit better while still not being stressed about those lulls. But other than that, man, I've since been out of that job, still going full steam. And I think the year as a whole has gone really, really well. Both getting out of our comfort zones with hiring and, continuing to grow our business. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to. What about you, man? How's your year been?
Well, I don't want to jump to me yet, dude. I want to follow up on that. I think it's impressive because what happened was when you went, you were at a different stage than I was when I went to go work at Ruth's. So you went to go work in the restaurant industry, like you had commitments. So like you were still doing the podcast, you were still paying people, you were still running your job. I think it was really impressive. I mean, we did it at different times in our business, but I think like we need to normalize the fact that sometimes like when the valley hits, you need to come up with a solution. And the amount of people I think you could agree that like have hit us up about like, dude, like, money's tight right now. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm new in the business. You and I can both freely say like, look, this is what we did. We went to the restaurant industry because we had experience and this is how we did it,
And that's a good point. I don't, I to get real a little bit for the podcast, I was very, at first just honestly a little bit ashamed, right? You feel a little bit of shame when you say, I'm also working in the restaurant industry, had to pick up a second job, right? It's never something that, I was really happy to share or really wanted to share. It was kind of tooth and nail to kind of pull it out of me, right? But I love how you said it honestly should be normalized. I think the restaurant industry in particular, we structured it in a way where we were still able to keep our foot on the gas in our real estate business, continue building it, from the 8 to 5, right? For the full day. And then just structure our secondary job in the restaurant industry to where we were only working nights, right? So that way you're still able to bring money in. I think from a mindset perspective, when you are not worried about paying your bills,
Right.
it makes focusing on that, your full time in real estate, just a lot less stressful.
Right.
Right. When you know your bills are paid and you're focusing your time on building a business, because that's what you're doing. You're laying all of the groundwork, right? It's the same as, building a house. You're grazing the land. You're building the house from the ground up, but you've got to have that solid foundation. So I think normalizing that it is helpful. And both of us now, me especially, since I'm more than happy to be transparent about that, share that. I think it is what young entrepreneurs should be doing if they are in a tight spot about money or stressed or anxious with those lulls, because like I said, it's a good time or a really good opportunity to relieve that stress. Make sure your bills are paid while you're building up your business to get you to the point where you no longer have to work that job.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I think you and I both felt embarrassed or stressed about that is that there's some kind of tie where we felt as if being a busser or being a server is somehow lower than being a realtor. And I think it's an important mindset shift. If you're working in that job, you're doing it because you're grinding. That's something that's admirable in society. We look as Americans at the American dream as you work hard and you build the life for yourself, right? And if you're a busser, dude, do the job as a busser the best that you can. And when you go to bed at night, be proud of what you just did. And then you wake up in the morning and you work hard, right? And I just posted a reel. Shout out to Jake. Thank you for shooting that. And he caught me off guard. I didn't realize that I was being recorded. And we recorded a video about my whole story. And dude, it was 100% embarrassing. And I don't know why I would be embarrassed about it looking back. Looking back, I'm proud that I made the decision to either nut up or shut up, right? I made the decision, I'm going to move forward with my real estate business. And I think especially with you going to school and being similar age, I had a lot of thoughts about, well, maybe this is my sign. I need to go back to school. I promise you going back to school would not have solved that problem. So, it's something where if you're listening to this podcast and your business hasn't blown up yet and you're thinking to yourself, well, damn, I need to maybe pick up a second job. Call me and Cade. We will tell you all day that was a great decision and it shouldn't be anything to be embarrassed of. It's something that you should be proud of, that you're making the decision to actually do it.
Absolutely. I think, you mentioned something that, I've seen in a couple places too, real quick before we move on, which was, if you're a busser or a waiter or a host or a hostess or you're flipping burgers, right? Whatever it is you're doing. If you yourself are doing that job to the very best of your ability, if you're going into work with the mindset that, hey, I'm going to be the best fucking waiter in this whole restaurant, my whole shift, and I'm going to come in tomorrow night and I'm going to do it again, right? If you come in with that mindset of you're going to be the best fucking waiter, host, hostess, busser that you can be, that's going to translate into all other aspects of your life, including building your real estate business. So I think having that mindset not only contributes to your personal growth, but also your business growth.
Yeah.
So if you guys are out there stressed, worried, even thinking about going and doing that, I think we've covered it. There's nothing embarrassing. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You're going to go out there and do the best job that you can do. Yeah. And then that's going to translate into all other aspects.
And let's just give some context. I mean, from the time that you started working in restaurant to now you have more, in your first half of the year, you doubled what you did last year?
So in the first quarter of this year, at the end of Q1, I did more than I did all of last year.
That speaks for itself.
Which was a really cool feeling. And I contribute that to, with part of the thing that I contribute to that is having that second job, making sure I was not stressed and anxious about, that my mindset and my time was not spent worrying about money. My time and my mindset was spent on building my business. So when all of the bullshit is taken care of and you can focus your time and energy on the business, it will skyrocket your business, right? Not
Right.
overnight, but it will definitely skyrocket where you're headed.
Yeah, and it's not a fluke. It's just
No.
not a fluke.
No.
I think that happened the same thing as me. The day I started at Ruth's, within that month, I closed my first deal in 6 months. I closed, by the end, I was closing 3 to 4 deals a month. Left Ruth's 5 months into my time there. And since then, I've had a couple months where I sold 0, but I've never had a year less than double the previous year. So,
Dude, let's talk about that. I want to talk about, because that is something that's been crazy for me to sit back and see since, I joined the Clayson group. I think, it was back in maybe 2018 or 2019 as an admin, maybe a year or
I joined middle of 2018, so you'd be early 2019.
So 6 months into, your real estate journey, sitting back and watching. Like,
couldn't afford a coffee. I had to drink soda.
Sitting back and looking at, you just said there hasn't been a year since where your business has not doubled or very close to it.
No, I've more than doubled every single year.
So what do you attribute that to? Like that's insane for me to think. And I've seen a little bit of similar growth on a smaller scale. But what do you attribute that to? Because that's
99% of it is just consistency. I mean, like, you've seen it. I'm only a year, let's call it a year and a half or 2 years ahead of you when it comes to the actual selling side of everything. I mean, the amount of referral business that comes back when you do good business, like, here's the key. If you want to actually do well, you have to be a good broker. So you have to be a good dealer. That means, like, you're not out here lying. You're not doing shady business. You're not in it for the buck. You're in it for the right reasons, because what will happen is it will always come back. But each year, it like the stress has gone more, and like the problems I have to solve are more difficult, but the amount of time I'm working is not as much. And yeah, it's more than doubled every year, including this year when I was buying a house. I'm getting married. I'm doing all these other things. And like, again, a huge part of it is like, do good business, do it consistently, and things like this where I've been educating myself. It's hard for me to not put my foot on the pedal if I know that I have a lead on you. If I freaking pull off that gas for even a couple months, like, I know that this business is a slingshot effect, and like all of a sudden you're going to be the one crushing, and you're going to be outperforming me, and then I'm going to have to catch back up. So it's always like a friendly competition, right? I know that I have a head start, so I'm like, I got to keep a certain amount ahead of Cade or else I'm losing this race, bro. And it doesn't mean that I'm trying to put anybody else down. It just means when I wake up in the morning, I have something to do, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because obviously we're business partners. We own rentals together. But I think that is one of the most important things for success. A big thing that I attribute to my growth is having somebody like you that is not only keeping me accountable, not only pushing me to do better, right? Because just like you're right there and know that you've got to keep your foot on the gas, I'm like, fuck, how do I put my foot on the gas even more to fucking get up there?
How do I catch up, bro?
You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that, we're out to get each other, or,
it's the opposite.
It's the exact opposite. And, with that, it just ties into a whole bunch of other stuff. First thing that pops up, the abundance mindset, right? I think that's a big reason why it's not out to get each other. We know there's business out there. There will always be business out there. There will always be enough business out there for the people who are willing to put in the work and have been putting in the work.
Yeah. No, it's been crazy. It's been a good time. And like you said, having somebody around, and that's part of the podcast too. Like, we've had to see each other a lot, because between the rentals, between sitting in the same office, running a podcast together, there's a lot that we work on together. And it's like, it's hard for me to not know what's going on in your business right now. And even when either of us have questions, it's like, hey, just quick feedback, quick script on something. Like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? What form? And again, it's helping each other and holding accountability for each other, where I feel bad for some of the people who sit in the office who don't have that partner. And I think that it's really hard to be the sole runner, and keep a good pace. When you have a partner with you, you push each other.
Yeah. Okay. I was sitting here thinking of what I wanted to say based on something you said, and then I forgot. Now I just remembered. A little while ago, you said that, there's always problems going on in your business.
Yeah.
Right? Or there's always problems going on in your life, right?
sure.
Whether it be personally or business, right? And for us way back when, and maybe for some listeners, the problems were, feeling like shit. Where is my money going to come from to pay my bills, right? And if only I was at the spot that Scott is at now. If only I'm at the spot that, Joe in the office is at the spot now. I would feel so much better.
Right.
Right. And we've made that progression from being that guy at, stressing about, covering the bills to now the guy who is getting all the bills paid. But it's not that Joe or Scott or Cade now don't have any problems. It's that the problems just change.
Yeah.
There's always going to be problems no matter where you are in your business journey, in your life journey. And I think that's an important concept to get and to comprehend, because now the problems are, shit, Scott and Cade both have to write a $12,000 check to cover their mistake of not getting a home inspection on one of their crappy houses out in South Bend. Right. Now the problems are, crap, how do I hire the right person to come in and help my business flourish and skyrocket even more, right? So it's not that there's no problems now, because I think that's just an unattainable and a fantasy to say that there's never going to be problems. It's just that the problems are continuously changing and shifting, and they will continue to change and shift, right? But being able to apply everything we've been instilled, everything we learn, everything that we are continuing to learn, I think is paramount, is integral to facing those new problems each and every day.
Yeah, and as you level up, you go from like, how am I going to get one escrow to how am I going to get 12?
Yeah.
Right? And so like right now, I have enough that Scott 2 years ago would have been like, oh my gosh, this is freaking awesome. And right now I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, it's like I need to go find something to do. So, it's just like you said, it's a continual growth. And I think what you said about like, don't ever expect it to just be no problems. That just doesn't exist. And, the problems get bigger and you get paid more to solve those problems. So, I think as you grow, and especially as we've grown between the time that we first did our podcast and now, it's like the problems we solve are much more difficult.
Yeah.
And let me clarify, we're still solving really easy problems. Like, we're solving like, how do you fix this one house? Not like, how do you fix, a huge 150 unit complex or something.
Yeah. And it still amazes me, shifting to, back to the actual podcast for a little bit. It still amazes me. And for all of you out there who are consistent listeners, for all of you who have even just chimed in for one episode, even if this is the episode you've chimed into, one, I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. It's definitely not the most informative podcast, but I really thank all of you guys from really the bottom of my heart, because it really does, no matter how cheesy it sounds, to think that there are people out there listening to the value that we strive and try so hard to provide on the podcast. It really makes me feel good, even if we log in and we see, one episode was a dud and it was 15 listens, right?
Oh, well.
Or 20 views on YouTube. It's like, dude, there are still 20 of you out there. I don't know, I know who some of you are, because you guys always hit us up and say, hey, great pod and stuff like that. But, to all of you else out there, I don't know who every single one of our listeners are. So just a very, very huge thank you to you guys, because that makes it, even in the tough spots of the podcast where, you mentioned it, like, a lot goes in to making the podcast, and to know that it is making a difference out there. I mean, we've had people come on. We had our boy Jake come on, close his first deal for $16,000, and now he's crushing it, right? big listener of the podcast. Like to see
Hugo Guzman.
all of Hugo, our first guy to come on, bro.
Made
Hugo
15,000
made
off of it.
15 grand. Dude, to know all of you guys are out there listening, watching, we really appreciate you guys. So
Yeah.
big thank you. Wanted to make sure I got that in while while it popped in my
Yeah.
head.
I mean, anything else you want to talk about? We're almost done with our drinks. It seems like at this point, if you've made it this far, you've probably listened to more than one episode. But
Yeah.
this is kind of a reintroduction to the Pursuit of Property podcast and kind of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, I think the only last thing I would say is if you, and it's funny because if you are a real estate agent, even if you're a real estate investor, right, asking for referrals is always, a little taboo at first, right? But then, both of us have had to learn like the right way to ask for referrals. It's not being pushy. It's not all of this, right? And I was listening to a podcast this morning. It was Ed Milet and Alex Hormozy, their podcast.
Not Alex Ramos.
Yeah. And saying, they were naming the 5 ways, the only 5 ways that you go and get new business. And the only one that is non-linear, the only one that really, these other 4, say if you put $10 in ad spend, you can predict, how much business is going to come from that. The one that is non-linear is referrals, right? And you mentioned it. Your referral network is booming. That's a huge point of your business. So the only thing that I would chime in when we wrap up is if all of you guys out there, if you have listened, if you have watched even one episode, and you have gained any sort of value from hearing Dumb and Dumber talk here on the podcast, if you guys wouldn't mind, like, leave a like on the YouTube videos, leave comments, leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, right? We really appreciate those. I know we've gone in and seen a handful. I know right now we're all at 5 stars, so
Boom.
which is dope. But we love seeing all those. If you guys have gained any sort of value, we would really appreciate, reviews, likes, even if it's just shooting us a text, we always appreciate getting those. Sharing the podcast with people who you might think might get benefit from it, would really mean a lot to us. So,
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up for me.
Well, this was kind of a unique podcast for us. First drinking episode. So welcome.
Done. All right. Well, all of you guys out there listening, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Pursuit of Property podcast. As always, we've got a great lineup of guest episodes coming on deck after this week. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.